The war between the Eastern Kingdom and the Western Kingdom had burned for many years. Villages were destroyed, soldiers fell in endless battles, and families lived in fear. At last, the rulers of both kingdoms decided the fighting could not go on. Peace had to be made, and the price of that peace was marriage. Queen Isabella of the Eastern Kingdom was young but strong. She had led her people through hard times, and she never let them see her weakness. Yet when she was told she must marry Daniel, the commander from the Western Kingdom, her heart grew heavy. She did not know him, but she had heard stories. He was said to be a man of steel, hardened by blood and victory. Isabella dreaded the thought of becoming his wife. To her, this marriage was not a bond of peace, but a chain of duty. On the day the treaty was signed, the air was filled with hope for the people, but fear for Isabella. Crowds cheered in the streets, waving banners of unity. To them, the marriage was a sign that war had ended. Children laughed again. Merchants opened their shops without fear of raids, and farmers returned to their fields. The kingdom felt alive once more, but Isabella felt no joy. She wore her crown with a steady face, yet her spirit trembled inside. Daniel arrived at the Eastern Palace to claim his bride. He was tall, with eyes that seemed to carry the weight of battle. His steps were steady, and his silence made him seem colder than ice. Isabella stood at the altar, her heart pounding like a drum. She forced her lips to smile, though every part of her wished to run. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and the marriage sealed before the eyes of thousands. The cheers of the people rose high, but Isabella heard only the beat of her own dread. When the ceremony ended, the new couple walked side by side. Isabella kept her gaze forward, not daring to meet Daniel's eyes. She wondered if he felt the same cold distance. To her surprise, he did not touch her hand, nor press his will on her. He simply walked in silence, as if he understood her fear and would not add to it. Still, Isabella could not trust him. She thought his calm might be a mask, a trick to hide his true nature. That night, as the palace lights dimmed, Isabella sat alone in her chamber. The golden crown lay heavy on her head, and the weight of duty pressed harder than ever before. She thought of her people safe because of her sacrifice, yet she also thought of her own heart, locked away behind fear. She did not know Daniel's mind, and that made him dangerous to her. She whispered to herself that she must stay strong, never let him see her doubt, never let him break her will. Far away in another chamber, Daniel stood at the window, looking out at the moonlit sky. He had fought many battles and had seen much death, but marriage was a different kind of war. He did not know the queen he had just married, and he did not know if she would ever accept him. Yet he felt no desire to harm her. His only wish was to honor the peace they had made. Still, he knew that winning battles was easier than winning trust. The first night of their union passed in silence. Two strangers bound by duty, two hearts divided by fear. The kingdom slept in peace, but within the palace walls, Isabella's dread remained sharp as a blade. She could not see beyond her fear, and Daniel could not break through it. The war outside had ended, but another war, quiet and unseen, had begun inside their hearts. This was the start of their story. A forced bond, a marriage built not on love, but on the hope of peace. Isabella felt trapped, and Daniel remained a mystery. Yet time would tell if dread would rule forever, or if something far stronger could rise from the silence between them. The days after the wedding were heavy with silence. Queen Isabella walked through the grand halls of the palace with her head held high, but inside she felt trapped in a cage. Her marriage to Daniel was meant to end the war, but it had also stolen her freedom. She believed he would treat her as nothing more than a prize taken from battle. Her heart remained closed, and her fear made her cautious with every word. Daniel did not push himself into her world. He stayed calm, never raising his voice, never showing anger. He joined her at the dining table, but their meals passed with only a few words spoken. Isabella kept her eyes on her plate, unwilling to open even the smallest door for him. She thought his silence was dangerous, that behind it lay plans to control her life. She told herself to remain guarded, for a commander who had fought so many wars could not know kindness. At night, Isabella lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of the palace. She wondered what Daniel thought of her. Did he see her as weak or as an obstacle? Did he even care for this marriage at all? Her thoughts chased each other until sleep finally came, but even in dreams she felt uneasy. In her mind, Daniel was still the enemy, no matter what words of peace had been spoken before the people. Yet there were moments that unsettled her doubts. Once, when a servant dropped a silver tray, Isabella expected Daniel to scold the boy. Instead, Daniel bent down, helped gather the fallen cups, and spoke in a calm tone. He told the boy not to fear, that mistakes happen, and that service to the crown was never easy. Isabella watched from a distance, surprised. It was not what she thought he would do. She tried to brush it aside, telling herself it was only a show. Another day, she was walking in the royal gardens when she saw Daniel standing by the fountain. He was not commanding soldiers or sharpening swords. He was quiet, watching the water flow as if he sought peace from it. He looked less like a warrior and more like a man who carried a burden. Isabella froze, hidden by the trees, and studied him. She wondered for a moment if he was as alone as she was. But the thought passed quickly, and she turned away, reminding herself that trust was dangerous. The council meetings added more to her confusion. The noblemen of the Eastern Kingdom expected Daniel to take control, to act like the conqueror they feared, but he did not. He sat beside Isabella, speaking only when asked, and he supported her decisions rather than pushing his own. When she ordered supplies for the farmers, Daniel agreed. When she defended the rights of the merchants, Daniel gave his voice in her favor. His behavior unsettled the nobles and puzzled Isabella. She asked herself why a man of war would choose not to command. Ow! Still, Isabella could not let her guard fall. She remembered the stories told by her generals, stories of Daniel leading charges that crushed her armies. She could not forget the cries of her people who had suffered during the war. How could the same man now sit quietly beside her, as if none of that blood had been shed? She carried those doubts like chains, and they kept her heart locked. The nights grew colder as autumn came, and with it, the silence in their chambers deepened. Daniel never pressed her, never tried to claim what the vows had given him. He remained on his side of the room, respectful and distant. Isabella wondered why. Was it patience, or was it indifference? Did he wait for the right time to show his true self? Her fear told her to stay strong, to wait and see, for danger might still come. Daniel, too, felt the weight of that silence. He had married not out of love, but out of duty. Yet he saw Isabella's fear in her eyes, and it pained him. He did not know how to ease it. He had fought battles with swords and shields, but this was a battle of trust, and he had no weapon for it. So he chose patience, believing that time might prove his heart. The palace seemed at peace, but within the walls of their marriage, a quiet struggle continued. Isabella dreaded the man she was bound to, and Daniel tried to show respect without breaking her spirit. Their story was only beginning, and though no war raged in the fields outside, a war of doubt and silence lived between them. The palace grew restless when sickness spread through the halls. Servants coughed in the kitchens, guards grew weak at their posts, and fear moved like a shadow. Isabella had seen sickness before, but never inside her own home. She ordered medicine from the healers, but there were not enough hands to care for everyone. For the first time since the wedding, she felt unsure of her strength. A queen could rule with law, but she could not fight sickness with commands. One morning, Isabella walked down the corridor and stopped in surprise. She saw Daniel carrying a heavy bucket of water. His hands, scarred from battle, now carried aid instead of weapons. He moved from room to room, helping the servants who were too weak to rise. He stayed by their side, giving them water, making sure they ate what little food they could keep down. His voice was calm and steady, and though Isabella stood hidden by the doorway, she could hear the care in his tone. Later that day, she found him in the servants' wing. A young boy sat on the floor, trembling with fever. Daniel knelt beside him, pressing a damp cloth to his head. The boy whispered that he had no family left. Isabella watched as Daniel placed a hand on the boy's shoulder and promised that he would not be alone. He told the boy that strength was not only in the sword, but also in the heart. He stayed with the boy until sleep came, and only then did he rise. Isabella felt something stir within her, a feeling she had not expected. She walked away quickly, her thoughts troubled. Could this be the same man who had led armies against her people? Could this be the commander she had feared? The image of him with the boy clung to her mind, breaking the wall of dread she had built. For the first time, she wondered if her fears were built not on truth, but on the scars of war.
Ow.
In the days that followed, Isabella saw more signs. Daniel spoke kindly to the healers, asking what they needed, offering his own strength to move supplies. When food grew scarce, he ordered his own portion to be given to the sick. He never boasted of these acts, never looked for praise. He simply worked until his shoulders ached. Isabella noticed how the servants looked at him with new respect, whispering that the commander was not the cold man they had feared. Still, Isabella held her guard. She told herself it might be a show, a trick to win her trust. Yet she could not deny the truth of what her own eyes had seen. When she passed him in the halls, she felt her gaze linger longer than before. He would nod politely, never pressing her, never demanding more than she was willing to give. That patience confused her most of all. Men of power were rarely patient. Why should he be different? One evening, as the sun sank low and the palace glowed in gold light, Isabella found herself standing in the courtyard. Daniel was there, his sleeves rolled up, lifting crates for the healers. His strength was clear, but it was his quiet care that struck her. He did not see her watching, yet she could not look away. For the first time, she felt her dread weaken. Fear was giving space to something else, something she was not ready to name. That night, Isabella sat by her window, staring at the moon. She thought about the boy Daniel had comforted, about the servants he had helped, and about the respect he showed her even in silence. She remembered how she had once believed he would be cruel, how she had braced herself for harshness. Instead, she found kindness in his actions, not in words, but in choices. She could no longer pretend it was only a mask. It was too consistent, too real. Her heart remained cautious, but doubt had entered the fortress of her fear. For the first time, she wondered if this forced marriage might not be a life sentence of dread. Perhaps there was more to Daniel than she had allowed herself to see. Perhaps beneath the soldier's scars was a man who understood kindness more than anyone she had known. The sickness would pass in time, but its mark would remain. It had shown Isabella a truth she could not ignore. Daniel was not the monster of her fears. He was something else, and the thought both frightened and comforted her. In the quiet of her chamber, Isabella whispered to herself that the story was changing, though she did not yet know where it would lead. The palace had grown calmer after the sickness, but peace never lasted long in a kingdom that had once known war. Enemies still lurked in shadows, and not all men welcomed the marriage that joined East and West. Some noblemen whispered that Isabella should never have married a commander of the other kingdom. Others plotted in silence, waiting for their chance to strike. Isabella knew danger had not vanished, but she did not expect it to come so close. It was late one night when she awoke to the sound of footsteps outside her chamber. At first she thought it was only a guard, but then the noise grew sharper, quicker. The door burst open and dark figures rushed inside. Isabella's heart raced as she leaped from her bed. He lowered his sword and turned to Isabella, his face pale from pain. The sight of his injury jolted her free from her fear. She rushed to him, her hands trembling as she pressed cloth to his wound. For the first time since their marriage, she looked into his eyes without dread. He met her gaze with calm, even as his blood flowed. His words were simple, spoken with quiet strength. "Your life matters more than mine." Those words broke through the walls around her heart. She had feared him, distrusted him, kept herself locked away. Yet here he stood, wounded because he had chosen to protect her. She could not deny the truth before her. As she worked, Daniel remained silent, his eyes fixed on her with a look she could not yet name. The first time she felt no barrier between them, no wall of fear, only a fragile thread of trust. That night changed everything. Isabella stayed by his side until the healers came. She did not leave him, even when exhaustion pulled at her body. She could no longer see him as a stranger. Trust had been born in danger, and though it was still young, it was strong. She felt something new growing inside her, something she had never expected to feel for the man she once dreaded. The kingdom remained on edge, knowing enemies would try again, but Isabella no longer felt alone. She knew Daniel would stand with her, not because of duty alone, but because he had already proven where his heart lay. The queen who once dreaded her husband now began to see him as the man who gave her hope, and the bond between them was no longer a burden, but a promise. The weeks after the attack passed slowly. The memory of danger still lingered in the palace, but so did the memory of Daniel's courage. Queen Isabella found herself thinking of that night again and again. She remembered his body shielding hers, his wound bleeding freely, and his words spoken with calm strength. Her dread had broken in that moment, and something new had taken root inside her heart. She no longer walked past him with cold silence. When they sat together at meals, she began to look at him, to speak simple words, and to listen to his answers. He did not push her or demand her trust, but his patience never wavered. Each day he showed his care not through grand gestures, but through steady respect. When she voiced her thoughts in council, he supported her. When she visited the villages, he rode beside her, protecting without control. When she grew weary from long duties, he asked nothing but offered quiet presence. These small moments gathered like stones, building a bridge between them. One morning, Isabella joined Daniel in the gardens. The air was cool, and the fountain glimmered in the early light. He was trimming branches with his own hands, something many would think beneath a commander. She asked him why he did such work himself. He answered that strength was not only for war, that care for simple things showed what kind of man one truly was. His words stayed with her. She realized that the man she once dreaded was nothing like the shadow she had feared in her mind. As days turned to months, the people of both kingdoms began to see the change as well. Rumors spread of a queen and a commander who no longer looked like strangers. Merchants told stories of seeing them ride together through the markets. Farmers spoke of Daniel lifting heavy sacks for the poor. Children whispered of Isabella smiling more often. What had started as a forced marriage now looked like a bond that grew stronger with each day. The people found hope in their rulers, and the hope spread faster than fear ever had. One evening, Isabella stood with Daniel on the balcony of the palace. The sky was painted with red and gold as the sun fell. She spoke softly, telling him that when she first married him, she had dreaded every moment. She admitted her fear, her doubt, and her struggle. Daniel listened in silence, his eyes steady. Then she told him that he had proven her wrong, not with words, but with the way he lived. She said she no longer felt chained, that she had found peace by his side. Her voice shook, but she spoke the truth her heart had carried for weeks. Daniel answered simply, saying that he never wished to be her chain, only her shield. His words were few, but they carried weight enough to last a lifetime. The bond between them grew deeper after that night. They worked together not as strangers bound by treaty, but as partners. Isabella ruled with wisdom, Daniel guided with strength, and together they held the fragile peace of the kingdoms. Enemies still tested them, but none could break what had been built between them. Trust had replaced dread, and kindness had built a bridge stronger than fear. In time, the story of their union spread far beyond their borders. Travelers carried tales of a queen who once dreaded her husband, and of a commander who showed her true kindness. Their story was told around fires and inns and in courts. It became more than a tale of marriage. It became a lesson that peace could be born not only from treaties and swords, but from hearts that chose care over fear. Isabella often thought of the first day she met Daniel, the weight of her crown heavy with dread. She compared it to the days she now lived, when his presence no longer brought fear but comfort. She had learned that kindness was stronger than chains, and that true strength was not in conquest, but in protection. Daniel had taught her that, not through speeches, but through the way he stood, the way he acted, and the way he placed her life before his own. The kingdoms flourished under their rule, not just because war had ended, but because their bond gave living proof that peace was possible. Isabella no longer whispered to herself in fear at night. She stood tall beside Daniel, not as a queen trapped by duty, but as a woman who had found hope in the man she once dreaded. Their story closed not with sorrow, but with the quiet power of kindness that changed everything.